The room was a gilded cage, West Vancouver's finest, with a gleaming mahogany table, Okanagan Pinot Noir sparkling in crystal glasses, and my family's smug faces lit by a chandelier worth more than my existence to them. I stood there, in a worn parka, scars from Afghanistan itching under my skin, while their laughter sliced me open. My father's voice was a blade, still squatting in that East Vancouver rat hole. "You're a disgrace to the Bennett name." My sister's cackle echoed, venomous. "What, sleeping on a mattress in Strathcona? Pathetic." Every word was a fist, pummeling the wounds of a veteran who'd fought for this country, only to be spat on by her own blood. The pain was raw, unbearable, a scream trapped in my throat. They thought they'd broken me. They were dead wrong. I'm Lila Bennett. I'm 36 years old. And I own the entire block they mocked, every brick, every deed, every lie they'll choke on. The chandelier's light danced across the mahogany table, casting shadows that felt heavier than the Okanagan Pinot Noir in their glasses. My family, the Bennetts, sat like royalty in their West Vancouver mansion, their voices dripping with the kind of confidence only old money buys. Douglas Bennett, my father, leaned back in his chair, his tailored suit crisp, his eyes scanning the room like a CEO auditing a failing branch. Evelyn, my sister, swirled her wine, her diamond bracelet glinting as she boasted about her marketing firm's latest deal, a multi-million-dollar contract for a Whistler resort campaign. Noah, my cousin, chimed in, his voice loud enough to echo off the marble floors, bragging about flipping a 10-hectare plot in Kelowna for a tidy profit. Margaret, my mother, sat at the far end, her pearl necklace gleaming, her smile polite but distant, like she was watching a play she didn't care for. Me? I sat in my faded parka, the only one out of place, my calloused hands folded, my silence louder than their chatter. Douglas turned to me, his gaze sharp as a skate blade. "So, you're still renting that Strathcona shoebox, eh? What's the rent on that dump? $1,500 a month?" His tone was a mix of pity and scorn, like he was addressing a charity case. Evelyn smirked, tossing her hair. "Honestly, Lila, do you even have running water in that place? I bet the pipes are older than Granville Island." Noah laughed, his Patek Philippe watch catching the light. "Strathcona? Buddy of mine says they're bulldozing that whole block for luxury condos. You might want to pack your bags before the cranes show up." The room erupted in chuckles, their amusement a knife twisting in my gut. I'd heard it all before, every family dinner, every smug jab about my simple life. But tonight, the words burned deeper, each one a reminder of the years they'd dismissed me, a veteran who'd carried more than they'd ever know. I sipped my water, my jaw tight, my heart pounding like it did in Kandahar under fire. "It's close to work," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Evelyn rolled her eyes. "Work? What? Showing renters around roach-infested basements? Real estate's for closers, Lila, not dreamers." Douglas nodded, like she'd just quoted scripture. "Bennetts don't rent. We own. Always have. You're 36, time to stop playing small." Margaret said nothing, her eyes fixed on her untouched salmon, as if my failure was just background noise. I didn't flinch, didn't argue. I'd learned long ago that defending myself only fed their egos. But inside, the rage was a wildfire, fueled by every insult, every assumption I was nothing. They didn't know I'd been building something bigger than their entire legacy, brick by quiet brick, in the shadows of their arrogance. The air in the West Vancouver dining room grew thicker, the scent of roasted BC salmon and Okanagan Pinot Noir mingling with the venom of my family's words. The mahogany table stretched like a battlefield, each polished inch a reminder of the Bennett legacy I was never allowed to touch. Douglas, my father, sat at the head, his silver cufflinks glinting as he sliced into his meal with the precision of a man who'd carved up entire city blocks for profit. Evelyn, my sister, leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping the crystal stem of her wine glass, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of tearing me down. Noah, my cousin, sprawled in his chair, his Tesla key fob dangling from his pocket like a trophy, his smirk as sharp as the knife he twirled. Margaret, my mother, kept her gaze on her plate, her pearl necklace a silent barrier between her and the fray. I sat across from them, my parka draped over the chair, my hands clenched under the table, the scars from Kandahar burning beneath my skin. Douglas set his fork down, his voice low but cutting. "Lila, let's be real. That Strathcona rental of yours, it's a liability. You're living in a 40 square meter box that's one bad storm away from collapsing. Why not move to Burnaby? At least it's civilized." His words landed like shrapnel, each one designed to wound. Evelyn jumped in, her laugh a jagged edge. "Civilized? Douglas, she's probably got roommates to split the rent. What's it like, Lila, sharing a bathroom with strangers in that dump?" Noah snorted, leaning closer, his cologne overwhelming. "I drove through Strathcona last week. Saw a guy selling bike parts out of a tarp. That your neighbor?" The table erupted in laughter, their voices a chorus of contempt, echoing off the marble floors. My chest tightened, the rage from years of these dinners clawing at my ribs, but I kept my face neutral, my eyes fixed on the water glass in front of me. "I like the neighborhood," I said, my voice calm, though every syllable felt like swallowing glass. Evelyn rolled her eyes, tossing her hair. "Neighborhood? It's a slum, Lila. I wouldn't park my Audi there, let alone live in it." She sipped her wine, her diamond bracelet flashing like a warning. "You know they're tearing that whole block down for high-rises, right? Better start looking for a new couch to crash on." Noah grinned, piling on. "Yeah, my firm's got a bid on that land. 5 hectares, prime real estate. You'll be out by spring, Lila. Maybe try Surrey, cheaper rent." Their words were a coordinated assault, each jab meant to remind me I didn't belong in their world of glass towers and private clubs. Margaret finally glanced up, her voice soft but laced with judgment. "Lila, dear, it's not too late to start fresh. Maybe a condo in Coquitlam. Something manageable." Her pity stung worse than their scorn, a quiet betrayal wrapped in maternal concern. My heart pounded, the memories of Kandahar, dust, blood, the weight of a rifle, mixing with the humiliation of this moment. I'd survived war zones, carried my squad through hell, only to be gutted by my own family's words. But I didn't flinch. I'd learned in the army to hold my ground, to let the enemy underestimate you until the moment you strike. "Strathcona suits me," I said, my voice steady, though my pulse roared like a Chinook helicopter. Douglas raised an eyebrow, his tone dripping with condescension. "Suits you? Lila, Bennetts don't settle for suits. We build empires. You're 36, still playing tenant in a building that's one bylaw away from condemnation. Step up or step out." Evelyn smirked, adding fuel. "Maybe she likes it. Low expectations, low effort. Right, Lila?" Noah chuckled, his watch glinting as he gestured. "Bet she's got a sleeping bag in the laundry room. Real cozy." I gripped my glass, the cold anchoring me as their words tore through years of silent endurance. They didn't know I'd spent a decade studying their game, their deals, their lies. They didn't know I'd walked away from war with more than scars. I'd walked away with discipline, with a plan. While they toasted their empty victories, I'd been building something they couldn't touch, something they'd never see coming. My silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. I took a slow sip of water, letting their laughter fill the room, each note a spark in the wildfire of my resolve. They thought they knew me, a broken veteran, a failure clinging to a crumbling apartment. They were wrong. I wasn't just living in Strathcona. I owned it. Every brick, every lease, every secret they'd mocked was mine. And soon, they'd learn what it costs to underestimate someone who'd already survived worse than their words. The laughter from the West Vancouver dining room faded as I stared at the untouched salmon on my plate, the taste of their scorn still bitter in my mouth. The chandelier's glow felt like a spotlight on my failure, each jeer from Douglas, Evelyn, and Noah a fresh wound layered over scars that never healed. I pushed back from the mahogany table, my parka brushing against the chair, and excused myself to the balcony overlooking English Bay. The cold November air hit my face, sharp as a slap, but it couldn't drown the memories flooding back, memories of a life my family never cared to understand. Out there, under the starless Vancouver sky, I wasn't just Lila Bennett, the disgraced daughter in a 40-square-meter Strathcona rental. I was a sergeant who'd carried a rifle through the dust of Kandahar, who'd lost friends to roadside bombs, who'd come home broken and found no one waiting. It was 2015 when I stepped off the plane at Vancouver International, my shoulder still screaming from shrapnel lodged too deep for surgery. Afghanistan had taken more than flesh. It stole my sleep, my peace, left me with nightmares that smelled of diesel and blood. I was 26, a decorated veteran with a Distinguished Service Medal, but to my family, I was a ghost. I'd shown up at this same West Vancouver mansion, my duffel bag still dusted with desert sand, and asked for help. Just a place to stay until I could stand again. Douglas stood in his study, his tailored suit as stiff as his voice. Bennetts don't beg, Lila. You want a roof? Earn it. Veterans Affairs will sort you out. Evelyn, perched on a velvet sofa, barely looked up from her phone. What, you thought we'd set you up in Kitsilano? Go apply for some low-income housing. Strathcona's got plenty. Noah, visiting from Toronto, smirked over his whiskey. Tough break, soldier. Maybe sell your medals for rent money. Margaret, arranging roses in a vase, said nothing, her silence louder than their words. I found a basement suite in Strathcona, 30 square meters, with a heater that rattled like a dying engine and a window that leaked during every BC rain. The rent was $900 a month, half my disability check, and the walls smelled of mold and despair. I'd lie awake, the hum of Granville Street traffic mixing with the echoes of mortar fire in my head, my PTSD a constant companion. The VA took 6 months to process my claim, and when I called Douglas again, desperate, his secretary answered. Mr. Bennett's in Whistler. Try next month. Evelyn texted me once, a single line, don't embarrass us by begging. I stopped calling. The pain wasn't just the cold nights or the panic attacks that left me gasping on the floor. It was the betrayal, my own blood turning their backs, their wealth a fortress I'd never breach. I'd fought for Canada, carried the weight of war, and they treated me like a tenant who'd missed rent. But in that darkness, something shifted. Alone in that Strathcona basement, I found a library flyer for a free real estate course at the Vancouver Public Library. I signed up, limping to the downtown branch with a borrowed laptop and a shoulder that burned with every step. The course was basic, zoning laws, property values, BC tenancy rules, but it lit a spark. I spent nights studying, my desk a folding table from a thrift shop on Hastings Street, my textbooks borrowed or dog-eared PDFs. I learned how to read market reports, how to spot undervalued properties, how to move money without drawing eyes. The army had taught me strategy, camouflage, endurance. Real estate was just another battlefield, and I was done losing. By 2017, I'd saved $20,000 from my pension, enough for a down payment on a single Strathcona unit, bought under a numbered company to keep my name clean. That was the seed, my first step toward owning the block my family mocked. Back on the balcony, the wind off English Bay stung my eyes, or maybe it was the weight of those years crashing down. Douglas, Evelyn, Noah, and Margaret sat inside, toasting their empires, oblivious to the war I'd fought to rebuild myself. They saw a failure, a veteran scraping by in a crumbling rental. They didn't see the woman who'd turned pain into power, who'd taken their dismissal and forged it into a plan. My hands gripped the railing, knuckles white, the rage and grief a tidal wave I could barely hold back. But I didn't need their pity or their money. I'd built something they'd never understand, a legacy born from the ashes of their betrayal, one they'd soon face in a boardroom they thought they owned. I stepped away from the balcony's biting wind, the sting of English Bay's chill lingering on my skin as I left the West Vancouver mansion behind. The weight of my family's mockery, Douglas's scorn, Evelyn's venom, Noah's smug jabs, and Margaret's silent complicity, followed me like a shadow. But as I drove my beat-up Honda Civic through the neon-lit streets of Vancouver, the rage that had simmered for years began to shift into something sharper, something honed in the crucible of Kandahar and those sleepless Strathcona nights. I wasn't heading to a crumbling rental, as they believed. I was going home to Strathcona Commons, a 6-hectare block of red brick apartments and iron balconies that I didn't just live in, I owned it. Every unit, every lease, every inch of that weathered courtyard was mine, bought with the kind of quiet strategy my family could never comprehend. I pulled into the gravel lot of Strathcona Commons, the familiar creak of the gate greeting me like an old friend. The buildings stood sturdy under the moonlight, their brick facades worn but proud, ivy climbing the walls like a promise that life persists. Mrs. Chen, a retired nurse with a sharp tongue and sharper eyes, was hauling a bag of groceries across the courtyard. "Need a hand?" I called, stepping out. She waved me off, her voice gruff. "Not unless you're fixing that leaky faucet in 3B. I grinned, taking the bag anyway. "Already on the maintenance list, Mrs. Chen." We walked to her unit, the smell of jasmine tea wafting from her open door. Inside, she handed me a chipped mug, her usual ritual, and fixed me with a stare. "You look like you just survived a war zone. Family dinner again?" I nodded, the ache in my chest flaring. "They think I'm a failure, Mrs. Chen. They think I'm scraping by in a rental." She snorted, stirring her tea. "And you let them?" I set the mug down, my voice low but steady. "Not for long." I pulled a folder from my bag, blueprints, financials, permits, all stamped with the seal of Maple Leaf Holdings. Mrs. Chen raised an eyebrow, flipping through the pages. "This you?" she asked, pointing to the company name. I nodded. 8 years ago, I bought Strathcona Commons. Started with 1 unit, $20,000 down, through a numbered company. No one knows it's me, not Douglas, not Evelyn, not Noah. Not even the tenants. Her eyes widened, a rare crack in her stoic facade. "You own this whole place? The whole 6 hectares? I leaned back, the weight of the truth settling like a rifle in my hands. "And 5 other properties, 3 in Burnaby, 2 in East Vancouver. All under Maple Leaf Holdings, my company. I beat out 2 Toronto hedge funds in a sealed bid for this block. Cash deal, no press, no noise." Mrs. Chen let out a low whistle, her tea forgotten. "You're a bloody ghost, Lila. How'd you pull this off?" I traced the rim of my mug, the memories of those early days flooding back, not the war, but the war after. The army taught me to move without being seen. In Kandahar, you don't wave a flag unless you want a bullet. In real estate, you don't flash your name unless you want vultures. I studied zoning laws, market trends, tenancy acts, all from a thrift shop desk in a basement suite. I took every cent of my pension, every ounce of discipline, and turned it into this. I tapped the folder. Maple Leaf Holdings isn't just a name. It's a scalpel. It cuts through the kind of bloated deals my family lives on, deals they think make them untouchable. I stood, pacing her small living room, the fire in my gut burning brighter. Douglas brags about his Whistler resorts, Evelyn's got her $1 million ad campaigns, Noah flips land like it's a casino game. They think I'm nothing because I don't play their game. But I've been playing mine for a decade. I own 200 units across Vancouver, all preserved for families, for veterans, for people like you, Mrs. Chen. I've secured $12 million in provincial grants for affordable housing retrofits, seismic upgrades, solar panels, the works. And they still think I'm the one begging for scraps. Mrs. Chen shook her head, a grin spreading. "You're gonna make them choke on their wine, girl." I looked out her window at the courtyard, where kids kicked a soccer ball under flickering streetlights. Strathcona Commons wasn't just a property, it was a community, one I'd fought to protect while my family planned to bulldoze it for condos. The pain of their betrayal still cut deep, but it had forged something stronger. I wasn't the broken veteran they'd left behind. I was the woman who'd taken their dismissal and built an empire they couldn't touch. "They'll find out soon," I said, my voice a quiet blade. "Not at a dinner table, but in a boardroom, where their lies won't stand a chance." Mrs. Chen raised her mug, a salute. "To quiet wars, Lila." I raised mine back, the first spark of triumph cutting through the scars. The Bennetts thought they owned Vancouver. They were about to learn I'd already claimed it. The Vancouver skyline gleamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Granville Tower's boardroom, a 30th-floor fortress of glass and steel where the Bennett family thought they ruled unchallenged. I walked in, my boots silent on the polished oak floor, my leather briefcase heavy with 8 years of calculated moves. The air was thick with the scent of espresso and arrogance, the long conference table lined with executives in tailored suits, their faces a mix of boredom and irritation. Douglas Bennett sat at the head, his silver hair catching the morning light, his jaw set like a man who'd never lost a deal. Evelyn perched to his right, her silk blouse pristine, her fingers drumming on a tablet as if she could swipe away any threat. Noah slouched across from her, his Tesla key fob spinning lazily on the table, his eyes scanning me like I was a typo in a contract. Margaret sat at the far end, her pearl necklace gleaming, her expression a mask of practiced neutrality. They didn't expect me here, not like this. I set my briefcase down with a deliberate thud, the sound cutting through their murmured side conversations. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady as a sniper's aim. "I'm Lila Bennett, Managing Director of Maple Leaf Holdings, the new majority owner of Granville Tower." The room froze, as if I'd dropped a live grenade. Douglas's pen stopped mid-scribble, his eyes narrowing to slits. Evelyn's tablet slipped an inch, her lips parting in a silent gasp. Noah sat up, his key fob clattering to the table. "What the hell are you talking about?" he barked, his voice sharp enough to echo off the glass walls. I didn't flinch, sliding a stack of documents across the table, audit reports, transaction logs, ownership transfers, each page stamped with the seal of Maple Leaf Holdings. "As of last quarter," I said, "my company acquired a 55% stake in this building. Fully legal, fully binding, fully done." Evelyn recovered first, her laugh brittle as ice. You're telling us you bought Granville Tower? Lila, you live in a Strathcona basement. You don't have the cash for a parking spot, let alone a skyscraper." Her words were meant to wound, but they bounced off me like spent shells. I opened the first folder, my movements precise. "Let's talk about cash," I said, my voice ablade. Exhibit A, $2.8 million invoiced for a roof retrofit that never happened. The roof's original, Douglas, but the payment went to a numbered company in Kelowna tied to your personal trust. Douglas's face hardened, his fingers tightening on his pen. Exhibit B, I continued, flipping a page. "Evelyn, your marketing firm billed $180,000 for a brand consultation that included a Tofino spa weekend and a $12,000 Chanel bag. No receipts, no deliverables, just a wire to your account." Her eyes widened, her hand clutching her bracelet like it could shield her. Noah stood, his face red. "This is nonsense. You're making this up. You're no investor, you're a glorified landlord for low-rent tenants." I met his gaze, unflinching. "Exhibit C," I said, sliding another document forward. "Noah, your firm diverted $3.5 million from Granville's maintenance fund to a land deal in Okanagan. The contractor? A shell company registered to your cousin in Penticton. No permits, no work, just a $1.2 million transfer to an offshore account." The room went silent, the kind of quiet that follows a mortar strike. Margaret finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Lila, this is family. Why are you doing this?" I turned to her, my heart a furnace of old wounds and new resolve. "Because family doesn't mean loyalty, Margaret. You all taught me that when you left me to rot in 2015. Douglas leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You're out of your depth, Lila. You think you can waltz in here with a few papers and take over? This is my empire." I held his stare, my voice colder than a January wind off Burrard Inlet. "Your empire's built on lies. I didn't take it, I bought it. And these papers?" I tapped the stack. "They're going to the Canada Revenue Agency unless you step down." Evelyn slammed her hand on the table. "You're bluffing. You're just a veteran with a grudge. I smiled, the first real smile of the day. I'm a veteran with a plan. Maple Leaf Holdings owns 200 units across Vancouver, $15 million in assets, and this tower. I've been playing your game longer than you think, and I'm better at it. The executives shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between me and the Bennetts. Noah sank back into his chair, his bravado crumbling. Evelyn's face was pale, her fingers trembling. Douglas stared at the documents, his silence louder than any outburst. I'd spent years in the shadows, learning their moves, their greed, their blind spots. The army taught me to strike when the enemy least expects it, and this was my ambush. Granville Tower wasn't just a building, it was proof that I'd turned their betrayal into power. You thought I was broken, I said, my voice ringing clear. You thought I was nothing. But I've been building while you were stealing. And now, you answer to me. The boardroom's silence lingered like the aftershock of a blast, the weight of my words. Lila Bennett, managing director of Maple Leaf Holdings, majority owner of Granville Tower, still hanging in the air. The Vancouver skyline sparkled beyond the glass walls, but inside, the Bennett family was unraveling. Douglas's face was a mask of granite, his fingers white around his pen, his empire slipping through his grip. Evelyn's tablet lay forgotten, her eyes darting like a cornered animal's, her silk blouse creased from gripping the table. Noah's Tesla key fob sat still, his bravado reduced to a clenched jaw and a stare that couldn't meet mine. Margaret's pearls seemed to choke her, her hands trembling as she clutched a water glass. The executives around the table shifted, their whispers a low hum, but I stood tall, my leather briefcase open, the audit reports a loaded weapon I hadn't yet emptied. Douglas broke the silence first, his voice a low growl, like a bear backed into a Fraser Valley ravine. You think you can humiliate us with this stunt, Lila? I've got the best lawyers in Toronto on speed dial. They'll bury your little company before the week's out. His threat was a reflex, the kind of power play he'd used to crush competitors for decades. Evelyn seized the moment, her voice shrill, her diamond bracelet jangling as she pointed at me. This is a setup. You forged those documents, didn't you? You're just a bitter veteran trying to drag us down. Noah jumped in, his face flushed, his words spilling out like a bad bet. Maple Leaf Holdings? Come on, Lila, it's probably some shell company you cooked up in your Strathcona basement. You expect us to believe you outbid us for Granville Tower? You're out of your league. Margaret's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes pleading. Lila, please. This is our family's legacy. Don't tear it apart. I let their words crash against me, each one a desperate shot from a sinking ship. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with the cold clarity I'd honed in Kandahar, where hesitation meant death. You want to talk lawyers, Douglas? I said, my voice sharp as a skate blade on Rogers Arena ice. I've got a team from Davies Ward in Vancouver, and they've already filed a preliminary report with the Canada Revenue Agency. Your $2.8 million roof scam? It's on their radar. I turned to Evelyn, my gaze unflinching. And your forgery claim? Every document's been notarized, cross-referenced with public filings, and backed by a third-party audit from PwC. Keep talking, Evelyn. You're only digging deeper. Noah scoffed, but it was hollow, his hands fidgeting. You're bluffing. No way you've got the cash for a deal this big. I slid another folder across the table, its pages detailing Maple Leaf Holdings' portfolio. $15 million in assets, 200 units, 5 properties. I paid $22 million for Granville Tower's stake, cash, no loans. Check the escrow records. The room's air grew heavier, the executive's whispers now a buzz of unease. Evelyn's panic spilled over, her voice cracking. You're trying to ruin us. You posted that LinkedIn video, didn't you? Calling us crooks, spinning some sob story about being a veteran to get sympathy. I'd anticipated this. 2 days ago, I'd uploaded a 3-minute video to LinkedIn, not naming names but outlining Maple Leaf Holdings' mission, preserving affordable housing in BC, supporting veterans, building communities. It had 50,000 views in 24 hours, with comments from Strathcona tenants, local NGOs, even a Vancouver city councillor praising the vision. That video? I said, my smile a quiet blade. It's not about you, Evelyn. It's about the families you'd evict for your condos. The public loves it. You should read the comments. Her face drained of color, her tablet screen dark. Douglas leaned back, his eyes calculating, his voice dangerously calm. You want to fight, Lila? You'll lose. We've got connections, City Hall, the province, Bay Street. You're a nobody with a grudge. I stepped closer, my boots steady on the oak floor, my voice colder than a January night in Prince George. Connections don't erase fraud, Douglas. Your numbered companies, your offshore accounts, your fake invoices, they're all here. I tapped the audit stack. The CRA's already sniffing. You want to push this? You'll be explaining your $5 million Cayman transfers in court. Noah muttered, this is insane, but his voice was a whisper, his confidence gone. Margaret's hands shook, her water glass clinking against the table. Lila, please, we can talk this out, she said, but I cut her off. You had a decade to talk, Margaret. You chose silence. The boardroom felt like a battlefield, the tension thick as coastal fog. My family's desperation was palpable, their empire cracking under the weight of their own lies. I'd spent years preparing for this moment, moving in the shadows while they basked in their stolen spotlight. Maple Leaf Holdings wasn't just a company, it was my counterstrike, built from the pain they'd inflicted, the dismissal they'd weaponized. They thought they could bury me with lawyers and lies, but I'd already won the war. You have 1 week, I said, my voice ringing clear. Clean up your books, or the CRA gets everything. Granville Tower's mine now. You don't dictate terms, you follow them. The executives stared, some nodding, others frozen. Douglas's jaw tightened, Evelyn's eyes burned with rage, Noah slumped in defeat, and Margaret looked away. I'd turned their game against them, and they had no moves left. The Granville Tower boardroom was behind me now, its glass walls and polished oak no longer a battlefield but a canvas for something new. I drove back to Strathcona Commons under a soft Vancouver drizzle, the city's lights blurring like stars through the windshield of my old Honda Civic. The rage that had fueled me, through Douglas's scorn, Evelyn's venom, Noah's arrogance, and Margaret's silence, had burned itself into a quiet resolve. I'd faced my family, exposed their lies with Maple Leaf Holdings audit, and taken control of their flagship tower. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about building something that outlasted their greed, something that carried the weight of every scar I'd earned in Kandahar and every night I'd survived in that moldy Strathcona basement. As I pulled into the gravel lot, the familiar red brick buildings stood firm, their iron balconies catching the rain like a promise kept. The next week, I stood in the Strathcona Commons courtyard, overseeing the setup for a community barbecue. Paper lanterns swayed above picnic tables, their warm glow cutting through the evening mist. The air smelled of grilled BC salmon and cedar smoke, and the sounds of laughter and Neil Young's guitar riffs filled the space. Residents milled about, veterans swapping stories, kids chasing each other with sparklers, families sharing plates of bannock and potato salad. Mrs. Chen, her apron dusted with flour, waved me over to the grill. "You're late, Lila," she said, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Thought you'd be too busy running your empire to show up." I laughed, grabbing a spatula. "This is my empire, Mrs. Chen. Right here." She nodded, passing me a plate. "Damn right. Better than any glass tower downtown." I'd spent the last month restructuring Granville Tower, turning it into a mixed-use hub that served people, not profit. Floors 6 to 10 were now rent-controlled apartments, capped at $1,200 a month for 50 units, affordable for families and seniors. The lower levels housed small businesses, a Nanaimo bakery, a Coast Salish art gallery, a bike repair shop run by a local co-op. The mezzanine was a Veterans Resource Center, funded by a $2 million grant from Veterans Affairs Canada, offering job training, mental health support, and a quiet space for those who'd seen what I had in Afghanistan. I'd written the grant proposal myself, late at night in my Strathcona apartment, the same one my family mocked. Every lease signed, every tenant settled, felt like a brick laid in a foundation stronger than anything the Bennetts had ever built. Across the courtyard, I saw Evelyn, of all people, at a folding table, helping kids pipe icing onto cedar-shaped cookies. She wore a plain hoodie, no makeup, no diamond bracelet, just a name tag that read, volunteer. She caught my eye, gave a hesitant nod, and went back to the kids. Noah was nearby, stringing fairy lights with Mr. Leung, a retired carpenter who'd lived here since the 80s. Not bad, eh? Noah called, his usual swagger softened, his hands clumsy with the lights. I raised an eyebrow. Keep up, Noah. Mr. Leung's outpacing you. He chuckled, no trace of his old bravado. Margaret had stopped by earlier, dropping off a crate of Okanagan apples for the community pantry. She didn't stay, but her smile was genuine, a crack in her polished facade. Even Douglas had shown up at a tenant board meeting last week, sitting in the back, listening as residents discussed maintenance budgets. He'd asked one question, about solar panel costs, and left without a word. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I leaned against a picnic table, watching the courtyard hum with life. This was what I'd fought for, not just in war, but in the years after, when I'd pieced myself back together. Granville Tower wasn't a trophy, it was a tool to keep communities like this one alive. Strathcona Commons, with its 200 units and 6 hectares, was my first victory, but it was also my home. I didn't build it to prove my family wrong. I built it to prove something right, that a legacy isn't a name on a skyscraper, but the people who call a place home. You did this, Mrs. Chen said, nudging me, her voice soft. I shook my head. We did this. She grinned, raising her glass of Nanaimo brewed cider. To Strathcona, then. And to you, Lila. I clinked my glass against hers, the warmth of the moment settling over me like the coastal rain, steady, quiet, and enough. The Strathcona Commons courtyard glowed under the paper lanterns, their soft light weaving through the Vancouver dusk like a quiet promise. I stood by the garden gate, the same one I'd fixed a dozen times, watching the last sparks of the barbecue fade into the night. The laughter of kids, the clink of cider glasses, the hum of Neil Young's chords, it was all real, all earned, not through my family's name but through the work I'd done in the shadows. Douglas, Evelyn, Noah, and Margaret had mocked me, called me a failure, a veteran scraping by in a Strathcona rental. They didn't see the scars from Kandahar, the nights I'd rebuilt myself from nothing, or the empire I'd carved with Maple Leaf Holdings. But here, in this 6-hectare block of red brick homes, I'd built something stronger than their glass towers, a community that stood firm, like the coastal cedars weathering a BC storm. This wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving what's possible when you refuse to break. If you've ever been dismissed, told you're not enough, or left to fight alone, know this, your strength doesn't need a spotlight. It grows in the quiet, in the choices you make when no one's watching. Build something solid, whether it's a home, a dream, or a life, and let it speak for you. I learned that in Strathcona, in the army, in every moment I chose to keep going. You don't need a Bennett name to leave a legacy. You just need the courage to show up, to mend what's broken, to fight for what matters. If this story hit you, if you've ever had to prove your worth in silence, drop a comment below. Share your fight, I want to hear it. Give this video a like if it moved you, and hit subscribe to True North Courage for more stories of grit and heart. There's another tale coming, about a small-town Canadian who turned pain into purpose. Don't miss it. Because sometimes, the quietest victories are the ones that echo loudest.